Hey everyone, before we get into the video, I want to quickly announce our brand new Academy course we've been working on over on the website. With over 8 hours of content, this course is designed to take you from 0 to 100 in Valorant in terms of what you know. Our Radiant coaches spent the time making these courses that are tailored to one goal in mind, helping you become the best player you can be in the shortest amount of time possible. We streamlined the whole process, so what are you waiting for? Be sure to check out SkillCapped.com and let's get into the video. It's officially tier list time, ladies and gentlemen, but this time we're not talking about agents. No, instead, we're going to be shifting gears and ranking all of the guns in Valorant. It's been a pretty long time since we've updated this list, so it's about time we got around to it. So if you're looking for what weapons to abuse in episode 4, then you've come to the right place. But before we get to the good weapons, we of course have to start with the bad ones. And what better gun to kick off our D tier than the Stinger? Ever since the Stinger got those nerfs all the way back in episode 2, it just hasn't been the same. There's pretty much no reason to ever buy this gun, no matter what your bank account is looking like. The Sheriff costs 150 less credits and is just a much better gun. The Stinger just doesn't do enough damage and is far too inaccurate, making it pretty much unplayable. This gun needs a buff as soon as possible. Speaking of unplayable guns, the next weapon on our list is another cheesy eco weapon that was nerfed into the ground. Just like the Stinger, the Bucky had its meta, but that time is come and gone. Nowadays, the Bucky does little more than fill up the buy screen. If you're playing in any remotely competitive game in episode 4, don't buy the Bucky. For basically the same price, you can just buy a Sheriff, which is infinitely better. Otherwise, if you're looking for a shotgun and can't afford a Judge, I would argue that you're better off just getting a Shorty. To be entirely honest, it might sound like I'm saying the Bucky needs a buff, but from all my trauma from the Bucky meta, I think I'm comfortable with it remaining useless. Moving on, it's now time to talk about the first weapon in our C tier, the Shorty. The Shorty isn't exactly good, but at 150 credits, it is extremely cheap and can sometimes cheese a kill. The reason this gun makes it into the C tier instead of the D tier is because there are some niche situations where you might want to use it. The most important interaction with the Shorty is with Yoru's ultimate, where its quick pullout time makes it a very effective weapon when comboed together. Because of this, the Shorty does get to see some play. This niche, combined with being very inexpensive, is why it lands itself a spot in the C tier. The other weapon in the C tier this patch is the Judge. This is a weapon that could arguably be higher in the list, but because of how specific its uses are, I've decided to leave it here for now. If you can get up close to an enemy, this gun is basically S tier. Within its effective range, it's pretty much unbeatable because of its ease of use and high damage output. The problem is that you have to actually get into that range in the first place. This makes it very difficult to pilot on attack, and it's also very difficult to use when retaking on defense. It really only feels strong when an enemy team pushes into you, but there's also so much util in the game that can deal with it to the point that it's not really worth buying a lot of the time. It's really hard to cheese with the Judge when you have to deal with Sky Dogs and Sova drones in pretty much every game. But if you do get into a game where the enemy team lacks info gathering agents, you can use the Judge to get some easy kills. Next up on the list is the first B tier weapon, the Guardian. The Guardian is honestly a really underrated weapon, although I have started to see more players use it. It is a little bit on the expensive side at 2,250 credits, but it isn't a bad force buy weapon if you have the aim to pilot it. It has the potential to one-shot headshot from any range, which makes it very scary, and the buffs it got in patch 4.0 were not something to ignore. The removed fire rate penalty when ADSing combined with the extra bullet before it enters a recovery curve makes the weapon more accurate than ever. So if you're a fan of the Guardian, this is a good time to be using it. The second weapon in our B tier is the Bulldog, which is again a solid gun for force buy rounds. Unlike the Guardian, the Bulldog sacrifices one-shot headshot potential for a faster fire rate and the ability to shoot a deadly 3-round burst when scoped in. This makes the weapon feel much more consistent since you aren't required to always hit headshots with it. That being said, if you are able to hit headshots while scoped in, the 3-round burst is able to one-shot or I guess 3-shot at any range. It's very solid on buy rounds where you're just shy of the necessary credits to get a Phantom or Vandal, or when you're forcing on round 2 to take advantage of the fact the enemy team has worse guns. Overall, there are a decent amount of scenarios where you would want to buy the Bulldog, which is why it earns a spot in the B tier. Next up in the B tier, we have a pistol in the Frenzy. Although it's only a pistol, it's a pretty solid gun. You're usually only going to buy one on a pistol round depending on which agent you're going to play. An agent like Raze, for example, might want to buy a Boombot, leaving her with only 500 credits, which is enough to also buy a Frenzy. The big trade-off on pistol rounds is deciding whether you're going to buy light shields, a Frenzy, or a Ghost. And really all of those options are pretty balanced, so the weapon you pick is usually going to depend on what type of fights you plan on taking. If you plan on taking longer range fights, then you might want to buy a Ghost, while if you plan on taking shorter range fights, you might want to instead think about picking up a Frenzy. Because it's so balanced, the Frenzy earns itself a spot in the B tier. And speaking of the Ghost, that's the next gun on this list. Just like the Frenzy, the Ghost is pretty balanced. Within 30 meters, it deals 105 damage per headshot, and after that 30-meter range, it drops off to 87 damage. This allows the Ghost to be a one-shot kill on enemies that don't buy any shields, while being a two-shot kill on enemies that do when they're within that range. This gives the Ghost a nice balance of risk versus reward, where if you're able to hit a headshot on an enemy that also buys a Ghost, you will be able to kill them. But if you let an enemy with light shields get too close, then it will not be pretty. Overall, the Ghost has some good uses on pistol rounds for agents that can afford them, and is a solid buy when you plan to take mid-range fights on those rounds. Next up in the B tier, we have the Odin. The Odin can be very powerful. Its high penetration combined with its very fast fire rate can make it very hard to deal with in certain situations. It's usually at its most lethal when combined with Sova, who can ping enemies through walls to get cheesy wallbang kills. The problem with the Odin is that it's not exactly the best choice on every map, even in the hands of Sova. Really, the only maps where the Odin seems scary are Haven and especially Ascent. Those maps have a lot of wallbangable spots that make it really difficult to push into, but if you're playing on pretty much any other map, then the Odin is honestly not that amazing. That being said, the Odin is still more than strong enough to make the B tier, and if you do play on one of those maps, I would still be worried about it. With that, it's now time to talk about the last gun in our B tier, the Ares. Although not as strong as it was in the beginning of the episode, it's still a pretty formidable weapon. It effectively gives you a 1600 credit Odin with slightly less damage. It's still very strong, and there are still plenty of players that use it on save rounds whenever they have the credits. It can steal rounds when players aren't expecting it, and it can even sometimes win duels against players that are. It's not as easy to use nor as strong as it was just a month ago, but it still earns a spot in the B tier. Now that we're done talking about all of our B tier weapons, it's time to get into the A tier. From here on out, all of these weapons are going to be ones that you're going to see often and that are staple weapons in Valorant. We're no longer in the realm of the niche weapons, and to start off the A tier, we have the Spectre. The Spectre is in the top 3 light buy weapons in the game. Although it was nerfed fairly recently, it wasn't really enough to kick this weapon out of relevancy. At the end of the day, there really aren't many replacements for the Spectre at its current price point. If you can afford to buy one on a save round, chances are you're going to buy one, and because of that, it earns a spot in the A tier. Speaking of top 3 light buy weapons, next up on the list is the Sheriff. The Sheriff is one of the best save round weapons in the game, and is an incredibly efficient buy. The fact that it's able to one-shot enemies if you're able to hit the head is extremely important. One headshot from the Sheriff can potentially snowball around, since you can pick up the gun off the enemy you killed and then use it to get more kills. And it does that for the low cost of only 800 credits, which means that there aren't that many rounds where you won't be able to afford one. The Sheriff is an insane weapon and easily gets a spot in the A tier. Next up in the A tier is yet another pistol in the Classic. I'm sure at least some players are surprised to see the Classic this high because it's a weapon that you get for free every round after all. But if you really think about it, the Classic is very powerful. For literally no cost at all, you get a gun that can two-shot headshot a full armor enemy from within 30 meters that also comes equipped with a free shotgun in the right click. The Classic is very strong, especially for a free weapon. I can't tell you how many times I've been able to cheese kills by using the right click to get myself a free weapon on rounds where I had no money. All I'm saying is that you shouldn't underestimate the Classic. Moving on, it's now time to talk about the last gun in our A tier, the Marshal. This sniper is very strong, arguably even overpowered right now, and could honestly get a spot in the S tier. But for now, we're leaving it in the A tier. There are so many factors that make the Marshal feel as strong as it does. The fact that it's a one-shot to the head from any range, its incredibly fast fire rate, and it's also surprisingly accurate when hip firing as well. It also deals 101 damage to the body, making it effectively an operator on round 2 if you win the first round, since the enemies likely don't have any armor. And you get all this for the extremely low cost of 950 credits. It's also very strong on Jet, who can buy it on round 2, bonus with it on the 3rd round, and then usually afford an operator as early as round 4 or 5. The Marshal is very strong right now, and if you're not abusing it, you're definitely missing out. With that, we've now reached our S tier. These weapons are the best of the best in Valorant and are all pretty self-explanatory. The first weapon in our S tier is the Phantom. What can I say? Pretty much every time you can full buy, you're going to either want this weapon or a Vandal in your hands, and for the most part, the weapon you pick depends on player preference. The Phantom comes with a faster fire rate, better spray, and invisible bullets, making it better for burst firing and shooting through smokes. It's the best weapon if you plan on taking mid-range engagements. The only disadvantage to buying a Phantom is that it does have damage drop-off, meaning that it doesn't one-shot enemies from any range, but besides that one downside, it's a very solid rifle. Next up up in the S tier is the Phantom's brother, the Vandal. The thing that the Vandal has over the Phantom is its ability to one-shot enemies you hit in the head from any range. This does come up, and depending on the angle you decide to play, the Vandal can be the better weapon, but I personally prefer the Phantom. A lot of the time, enemies will take chip damage earlier in the round from utility, whether that's from mollies, shock darts, or raise utility, so the damage drop-off doesn't always matter. That being said, I do admit that playing with the Vandal does feel good sometimes, especially if you're not playing one of those agents with damaging abilities in their kit. Being able to kill enemies with one shot from any range can be very important, since there are a lot of times where the Phantom misses a kill and that enemy gets away with their life. There's no objective better option between the two rifles, which means it's really up to player preference which one they choose to buy. Either way, both the Phantom and Vandal are top tier weapons. Rounding off this list, it's now time to talk about the Operator. The Op is strong, and I'm pretty sure everyone knows it. It does have some weaknesses, like its really high price point and the time needed between shots, but when used correctly, it can feel unbeatable at times. Especially in the hands of an agent like Jet or Chamber, who have abilities that can help mitigate its weaknesses, you can start to see the true power of the Op. In games where your team isn't doing very well, it can make a game feel unwinnable. There's a lot of utility in the game that can help deal with it, but using utility to fish out an Operator takes a lot more teamwork than it does to just be the one holding the Op. I can't tell you how many times I've tried droning for a teammate just to have them push out in front of it and die to the Op. The Operator is a very powerful weapon, especially in the hands of the right agent, and because of that, it deserves a spot in the S tier. Quick reminder before the end of the video, don't forget to check out SkillCapped.com if you're looking to improve this episode. We have guides on how to master all of these weapons, and what's even better is they're only a few clicks away. On SkillCapped.com, you'll start your journey to becoming a better player, and we're so confident we can improve your play, we even offer a rank improvement guarantee, so there's literally no risk. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to SkillCapped.com and get started today. Anyway, that's all for this video. Let us know in the comments if there are any guns you think deserve to move up or down on our list. If you made it to the end of this video, don't forget to leave us a like, as it really does help us out. All of us here at SkillCapped want to give you a huge thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.